At Vanderbilt, it's Tim Corbin and the Vandy boys, Jerry Stackhouse on the hardwood, and Clark Lee on the gridiron. Nashville, it's time to sit back, relax, grab a cold one, and enjoy the show. The Music City is our stage, and West End is where we rock. You're listening to The Door Report, the premier Vanderbilt podcast for fans who bleed black and gold. Commodore Nation, anchor down.
Welcome into The Door Report. It is episode 189. It is a Tuesday night, November the 8th. We are powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors, family owned and operated for more than 2 decades. Alaco Fine Wood Floors is Nashville and Middle Tennessee's choice for premium quality hardwood floors. Since 1995, Jimmy Alaco and his army of employees have embodied the approach of taking pride in one's craft and providing superior customer service, growing from a one-man shop to a team of 23 professionals who share the founder's passion for quality craftsmanship and customer satisfaction. If you are interested in contacting them, you can find their headquarters at 2505 Winford Avenue over in Berry Hill, or give them a call at 615-356-0303. They also have a website, alacofinewoodfloors.com. Alaco Fine Wood Floors, serving Middle Tennessee's hardwood flooring needs since 1995. All right, well, this is a basketball episode. We're a little bit late, but the season started too early. You gotta cut us some slack, Vandy fans. We are just now getting to our 2022-2023 Vandy Hoops season preview, and we've got a game to recap as well. Vanderbilt and Memphis. Of course, Memphis got the win. We've got a lot to get to in that game, Will. Obviously, a lot of negatives, but a few positives here and there. It is game one, so you can't overreact, but knowing us, we're going to overreact to this game. So, Will, I know I was there. I'm pretty sure you were there at the game too, right?
No. Unfortunately not.
Okay.
I did not get to go.
Unfortunately not.
Tickets were too expensive for me to take the gamble that I wasn't going to be out for work in time, even though I do live pretty close. I just couldn't risk it. If the tickets are under like $20, $30, I'll do it every time, but they were not under we don't have that door report money coming in yet.
No, not yet. Well, you didn't have to sit through the sauna that was Memorial Gym that night. It was ridiculous how hot
it's never had an AC, Billy.
No, but it's also, we've never started the season this early. So people talking about, this is ridiculous. It is ridiculous, but I don't know that the season has ever started this early. And it was like 80 degrees that, yesterday for most of the day. So not really surprised, but I've never been in Memorial Gym when it was that hot. So, Will, you weren't there, but brutal loss. I mean, I don't know about brutal. It's too early to say brutal, but it was definitely a tough loss. That was not a great showing from Vanderbilt.
Yeah, the loss part of it isn't really what I took away from it. The outcome in this season for Stackhouse is going to be determined by wins and losses, just to put that out there early in the podcast. We've said that leading up to this season, and we've continued to say it. We didn't say that in the past about Stackhouse, and now we're holding him to that standard. So that's just something at the beginning here that going into this game, it's going to be evaluated a little bit differently than our other basketball recaps have been, but it was really the lack of identity early. And I know it's early. There's new faces. You don't have Scottie Pippen Jr., but the first immediate reaction from the starting lineup is this team experienced, or are they a young team that has talented freshmen building for the future? And Stack by no means answered that question in any way with his post-game comments. So I'm still sitting here way more confused after actually seeing this team in a regular season game than I was going into the season. Thoroughly disappointed and confused is an early statement that I would use here.
I would agree. I think Stack said we're young, but we're talented. And then he said at the end, he said, we've also got some experienced guys. So I'm confused too. Will, I was very confused, just not the effort, but just the lack of offense and lack of really anything offensively. And, We know the defense struggled at times, but Memphis is a good team too. We'll talk about that whole game, and we'll get to a season preview. Well, before we get to that, though, don't forget to follow us on Twitter. If you're listening, that's at @door_report. We've got Instagram, door.report. Like us on Facebook. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Our podcast is available on Anchor, iTunes, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. And while you're at it, give our podcast 5 stars and a review on iTunes. All right, let's get to the Memphis recap and the season preview. All right, well, let's get into it. I'm excited to just talk about this and what we saw. I know it's just one game, but I was ready to get on here with you and just kind of recap this game and talk about what we saw. Obviously, Memphis ended up winning 76-67 inside Memorial Gym. Ended up being somewhat of a respectable final score, but Memphis controlled the entire game. I mean, that they were up 15, 20 points for most of that game. Vanderbilt cut it to, I think, 8 was the closest they cut it to, and they cut it to 10, I think, another time. But you really never felt like Vanderbilt was gonna get back into the game. I mean, they really didn't ever get into the game, and they started really slow. But right now, Memphis is simply better. I mean, they're a better team right now. Maybe later in the season we rethink it, but right now Memphis is the better team. They're more physical, they're more athletic, and they appear to be the better shooting team. I mean, they're a deep team. They looked like a top 25 team, at least last night. Quite frankly, I mean, that's what they looked like. Now, I think Vanderbilt, there was a lot of what Vanderbilt did, but Memphis is a very good team. I'm not looking at this game saying, oh, Memphis is a good team. They're a great team. No excuses. There are excuses for this one. There aren't excuses for this one. But, Will, I sit there and say that, the way it started was just so stark. I mean, you look at it and being in the gym, it was kind of eerie. Like, what is going on? I mean, you really couldn't put a finger on it. Obviously, they couldn't put the ball in the basket. That was the main thing. But at the same time, Will, the starting 5 was interesting too. We didn't see Liam in the starting 5. You really only saw 2, maybe 1 score. I mean, there wasn't much offense in that starting 5. And throughout the game, Will, you didn't see the experienced guys playing. The freshmen played most of the game. I mean, you saw a lot of Colin Smith, a lot of Malik Dia. Not saying those guys played bad at all. They actually played pretty well, I thought. But, when you're playing freshmen against an experienced, deep Memphis team the way they are and how athletic they are, it's probably not going to go well. And it didn't go well. So it was just weird, Will. I don't really know how to put a finger on it other than, bottom line, they couldn't put the ball in the basket. But I think there's deeper issues here. I mean, I really do. There's not, at least last night, there's not a go-to scorer. Jordan Wright wasn't that. Coming into the season, we said Jordan Wright has to be that. He has to be that go-to scorer. He has to be that guy, but he wasn't. And I think similar to last year with Scottie Pippen, when he struggled, Vanderbilt they weren't winning. And it might be the same story this year with Jordan Wright, but coming into the season, we thought they were deeper. We thought they were deeper than just Jordan Wright struggles. This team is losing. So, Will, I can't put a true finger on it. I mean, they shot just 41% from the field. They were 12 for 30 from 3-point range. Most of those came late in the game, though, so it was really probably technically worse than that. I thought Tyron Lawrence was really the only bright spot. He had 14 points, but, I mean, they turned the ball over. Silly, just drop passes, too. So, Will, obviously it's the first game, but there were some glaring things that happened, and you sit there kind of scratching your head, especially for the people there. I mean, the fans and the students just really never had anything to really get behind and cheer for. I mean, that's really what it was.
I think I probably view this game and the players' performances differently than you do and a lot of people that watch that game, and that's fine. I think you have differences in opinion because I think a lot of what you just said, I kind of view the opposite. I view that Stackhouse started the game with only experienced players in the lineup, clearly setting up the team for failure, having 3 guys on the court that cannot consistently score from the outside, in Tyron Lawrence, Quentin Malora-Brown, and Ezra Mignon. The only guy that can really consistently shoot and make the defense get out of help in that entire lineup is Miles Stute, because they're still going to guard Jordan Wright as a driver and a slasher. This team got down and had 6 points at the 10-minute mark, I believe, or the 11-minute mark of that first half. And that was all with experienced guys, including Ansong, I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah. I really hope, who played his tail off.
Yeah, he played really well.
But he is very athletic, but he is a role player. He's not an offensive scorer. when this team had success was when Colin Smith, and regardless of, some moments that he had, when Malik Dia was in there, when Dort was in there, when Trey Thomas was in there, who I thought actually played really well. This team doesn't have a Scottie Pippen Jr. Mm-hmm. And how this lineup was set up was for Jordan Wright to be Scottie Pippen Jr. reincarnate, to have one shooter out there and basically 3 distributors and defenders. And that was the starting lineup. And Jordan Wright is not Scottie Pippen Jr. You have to either have a guy, and then you can have whatever you want as long as you have at least one shooter around him out there on the court, or you have to have at least 2 shooters alongside a slashing driver. And for the most part, Jerry Stackhouse just didn't play that combination of players, even though the puzzle pieces are there on this roster right now in the guys he was playing. So I was just baffled throughout this whole game at his usage of Colin Smith and rotating only freshmen in alongside bench players. You never really saw Miles Studi and Colin Smith consistently on the court at the same time. You didn't one time, and I know he was in foul trouble, see Liam Robbins and QMB in the game like you saw so many times last season, to combat the length and size and athleticism you saw from Memphis, where they dominated Vanderbilt on the glass, and you never saw the utilization of the size that you have. I was just very, very disappointed in the choices that Stackhouse made in utilizing this roster's talent, and and not throwing away this season, because I think the pieces are there to be improved, and I think the talent is improved. And you got to keeping in mind that this is Memphis. You didn't start out the season with Tennessee Tech, it's my alma mater, so no hate there, or like Cleveland State. This is a good Memphis basketball team. I think we were talking about it a little bit in some Vanderbilt group chats, and I would peg them probably they're going to fall somewhere in the 5 to 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. So you weren't playing a scrub team, but you saw some issues and you saw some identity issues. And I think that Stack just has to learn what works.
Yes.
And for some reason, he's unable to evaluate that correctly in the offseason and in practice, because you can say what you want about these coaches know 1,000 more things than people who are analyzing the game or me. Well, whatever just was put out on that court and that combination of lineups isn't going to work. And that's clear from the moment. This wasn't a synced up issue. This wasn't a practice it further issue. There was the same lack of respect to the back action on the backside of the offense. So it ended up just completely going away at certain points. The backside of the offense was just stagnant for 15 seconds at a time. And Memphis never had to get out of help. So driving lanes were just never open. And that was because they had scouted the lineups that Vanderbilt was putting out on the court, didn't have enough outside shooting to make them respect that. So Stack, you have a lot of work to do, because the lineups today, I'm not really sure, outside of the one I actually put into the Dora report when they went on that run that you're referring to, actually, when they cut it to 8 in the second half. I texted the Dora report group and said, I like this lineup right now, minus Dia, I said, but he actually ended up bearing 3. But you could clearly see this lineup has enough shooting to spread out Memphis's defense and allow for drivers to get to the basket. And it was the only time in the game you saw a correct lineup from Jerry Stackhouse.
Yeah, the rotations were pretty baffling to me as well, especially in the second half. I mean, there were lulls where Jordan Wright and Liam Robbins and Studi would be on the bench for like 7-8 minutes, it felt like. I mean, so I'm with you on the rotations. The one thing I look at as well is, I think we need to figure out, what does Jordan Wright have to be for this team? I mean, what does he have to be? Does he have to do what Scottie Pippen did last year? Or can guys around him like Studi or Robbins and other guys step up and kind of help provide that? And I think that's what Stackhouse wants, and that's what he thinks. But it did not happen last night. I mean, Memphis, defensively, they did a lot of things that Vanderbilt probably, it was tough to prepare for, but at the same time, offensively, the lineup that was out there, you're not going to get a whole lot done. You're just not. So, I totally agree. Offensive strategy was interesting, to say the least. Jordan Wright and Liam Robbins were both non-factors. Again, I'll credit Memphis's defense a lot for that as well. But we'll also credit Robbie Weinstein with the note. That was the first loss in a home opener since 2007, and that game was against Jeff Green and Georgetown. So another kind of deathly comparison there for Vandy fans. But so this doesn't usually happen, but you also don't usually play Memphis to start the season. So, we were talking before we got on here, we were going to do a positive spin and a negative spin. That's going to be the way. We're not doing 3 main takeaways. We'd probably have 2-hour episodes for basketball. But let's do our positive spin and negative spin on this game because it was a loss and a pretty bad one, and they didn't look great. We're going to start with a negative spin. And I know we just talked about a lot of it, but for me, the negative spin here is, there's zero offense. And I know we just talked about that, but I don't know that this is an issue of rotations. I think this team will struggle offensively this year for most of the season. Now, obviously, Jordan Wright's going to play better most games. They're going to shoot better most games. Liam Robbins should get more touches inside in the paint than he did against Memphis. But offensively, if they play the way they did against Memphis, we're going to see a worse team than we did last year. It's bottom line. I mean, you can't play that way and expect to beat SEC teams. Jordan Wright after the game was comparing that Memphis team to an LSU type team with how long they are and how athletic and just defensive minded they are, but they also get out and run. I mean, that was a team that, when they got a turnover, they would get out and run. That's what Vanderbilt didn't do. When Vanderbilt's at their best, they're creating havoc. They're trapping. They only trapped a few times. I thought when they trapped, they created turnovers. Now, they didn't really score off of those. But for me, the negative spin here, it's pretty obvious, putting the ball in the basket. I mean, you mentioned it. What was it? 6 points at the 10-minute mark? At the 10-minute timeout? I mean, that's pathetic. It really is. So, and it was just a weird, eerie feeling in the gym where, I don't know that we expected this team to light the world on fire against Memphis, but we didn't expect them to get manhandled the way they did. So shooting, I mean, they looked antsy. I mean, shooting the ball. I know you saw the Colin Smith air ball. We saw some other shots that would just graze the rim. So I think a lot of it is settle down, get settled. Obviously, they'll get a win on Friday, but it's just offensively, Will, I didn't see anything that was encouraging, anything that points to me that this is going to be a quick fix. I didn't. I mean, Jordan Wright is a guy, when he has 3 points for most of the game, that's usually a bad sign. But at the same time, you're also shooting bad all around. I mean, everybody was shooting awful. So, the negative spin here, I mean, I think we can agree on this, is that offense was bad, but at the same time, they also looked out of sync. I mean, they just, you expected him to look a little bit more comfortable, at least the experienced guys. And the freshmen, you said it, Will. I mean, they went in there and played with more confidence, it felt like. I mean, Colin Smith and Malik Dia, those guys are going to be really good players. I know we didn't see Noah Shelby. Apparently that's a defensive liability type thing. But I think at this point, they'll have to see what Noah Shelby has. I mean, you have to. So, Will, it's just the upperclassmen obviously were disappointing. Stack said that after the game. They got to play better. But at the same time, when you've got those freshmen back there that are ready to play, like Colin Smith and Dia, and even the newcomer with Ansong, I think that's how you pronounce it. I mean, when those guys are playing better and the way they did, keep them in the game. Obviously you don't want Jordan Wright and Liam Robbins sitting on the bench for as long as they did, but when they're not doing much, it is hard to blame Stackhouse there. But at the same time, it was a whole team type thing. I mean, they were just completely out of sync. Memphis took them out of any sort of rhythm. So, obviously, a lack of putting the ball in the basket is the negative spin there. And I think you would agree.
Yeah, I mean, I think the negative spin in this is going to be fully negative because I will be getting all of my positives out on the positive spin. So I'm not going to be giving any caveats here. The negative spin is this is the exact same problem this team had last year, and Stackhouse decided to play the exact same guys, and holy shit, the exact same problems were there. That's what makes no sense. You basically put out the same exact team that you put out last season and replace Scottie Pippen Jr. with Ezra Mignon. That is a recipe for disaster and makes no sense. I don't know if he was sending a message. I don't know what was going on. But if that is the lineup that is continuously used, this team will continue to be good enough to, in this out-of-conference schedule, win a few games, maybe go 5-6 wins, but you'll ultimately be fighting to barely stay out of or be in those first four, the first opening night of the SEC tournament. And when you look at how the offense performed, nothing will tell you different. I don't really understand what the purpose is of having your 1 and 2 guards as really not shooters or scorers.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I have the biggest difference with Jerry Stackhouse. And maybe he was expecting, and obviously he was expecting, a better performance out of Jordan Wright than he had. And I think we will see better performances out of Jordan Wright than we saw. Memphis is a very long and athletic team that's going to impact him a lot when he has that kind of lower, slower release from the outside, and predominantly relies on, big body drives using his frame to create contact with defenders. Length doesn't exactly play into that well. But Billy, this is my negative moment. I can see an anxious look on your face here. I'll have a positive spin to this, I promise, to balance it out.
I'm waiting on it.
That will sound insanely glass half full and like we're floating in a meadow of rose petals. So don't you worry. I see the worried look.
I'm ready for it.
You see the continuous high screen action, semi kind of horns or box action from Jerry Stackhouse, and he still doesn't utilize any sort of shooters from the backside on offense. And that's been my issue, and I've talked about it from the moment we started this podcast with Jerry Stackhouse, is he does nothing and to get shooters open on the backside for these baseline drives that he keeps setting up. He keeps setting them up for Tyron Lawrence and for Malik Dia. And that's okay. They're not awful shooters. I'm not saying Tyron Lawrence can't shoot. I'm saying that cannot be your first option on offense. And the majority of the players that played a majority of the minutes are role players. Right now, you have maybe Liam Robbins. We haven't really seen him be able to go full strength at a full length of a game.
Yeah.
Maybe Jordan Wright if he can step up, but I kind of see him as a number 2 option for the most part. You have a shooter in Miles Studi, and that's going to be one of my main positives, is you have a fucking shooter in Miles Studi. Every time that ball leaves his hand, you think it's going into the basket. But other than that, who is a guy that you think at the end of a game can get the ball, make a play? And I don't think Jerry Stackhouse started out. I don't think he started out on the court with any of the guys that in the future will be that guy. And I know he didn't start out on the court because he didn't play the young guys for the first 10, 11 minutes of this game. And Colin Smith was the only one of the 3 touted freshmen that played more than 3 minutes or even entered the game in the first half. So I don't know what's going on with the dynamic trio, but there's clearly some issues there. So this is the end of my negative spin. Noah Shelby and Lee Dort are not going to sit on the end of the fucking bench their freshman year. They will be gone, as will Jerry Stackhouse. So he better figure it out. End of my negative spin.
That's the negative spin right there. You know you're ready for a negative spin with Will. All right, let's get to the positives here. Let's get to the positive spin for this game. And I think it is obvious. It's the first game of the season. It's the first game of the season, and you're playing a team that, like you said, Will, is probably a 5 to 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. I mean, that's a pretty damn good Memphis team. Kendrick Davis is a legit Power 5 point guard, and I mean, he's elite. I mean, he played really well. DeAndre Williams, their post player, is athletic. He's big. He's physical. I mean, they're athletic. They're long. I mean, they had depth too. I mean, they brought Keontae Kennedy off the bench, and he played really well. A guy that hint was a Vandy commit, and somehow that didn't work out. But well, I look at this team in this game, and they're going to learn a lot from this. At least I hope they should. I mean, you have this Memphis game on film, and this will prepare you for really every SEC team you play. I mean, and it should. I mean, Jordan Wright compared it to an LSU type of team, and this Memphis team, they are first game of the season right at the gate. That's a pretty tough team to prepare for. I mean, you cannot simulate what they do defensively in practice leading up to a game like that, especially if you don't have the guys to do it in the scout team defense. I mean, it's almost like the way you prepare for a triple option offense. I mean, it's hard to do. You get into the game, it's like, wow, these guys are long, they're fast, they're athletic, and they can shoot. I mean, it's like felt like they didn't miss from 3. I mean, they shot the ball. They shot the ball really well. I don't know if that was some fluke or what. Or if they're just a really good shooting team.
26% though, Bill.
True stats, but it felt like
hey, their free throws. What it made you feel like they shot 17 and 19 from the free throw line.
Yes, they got to the line a lot, and they made a lot of their free throws. So I'm looking at the free throw line for the most part, but it did feel like they made more threes from deep than I anticipated. Going into the game, obviously they shot a lot, but they made some big shots in big moments. I mean, it felt like when Vanderbilt would get within 9 or 10 or even 11, they would bump it back up to 14 or bump it back out every single time. It was frustrating as hell. So I just think, well, yes, it's one game. I do think the negatives outweigh the positives. I think you agree. But the positive is Jordan Wright only scored 7. How many times is that going to happen this year? Hopefully not many more times. Liam Robbins, 7 points. So, you would expect both of those guys to double that and get up to at least 14 or 15 in that range. And, if they do that, you're in a lot better spot. So I just think, well, it's the first game of the season. Tough team to prepare for. You have to play that Memphis team right at the gate. That's not fun. That's not fun at all. Obviously it's a fun rivalry that might be, created here with Stack and Penny. And, I don't know if Penny outcoached Stack. I mean, maybe you could say he did, but he does have a better team. He's got better athletes. But he's also the timeline. Is Penny in year 4 or is it 5 now, Will? And I can't remember what I saw from Penny, but they've been there pretty similar years, amount of time to build a roster. So there's really no more excuses for Stackhouse, the staff, and this team this year. Will, I think you would agree it's NCAA tournament or bust. I mean,
yep.
It's year 4. It is year 4. We need to start kind of hammering that down. I don't think we did. We haven't talked about basketball this season yet, and we will hammer it down in this preview. But there's a lot of pressure on these guys. There's pressure on Stack. I know he may not feel it because of the extension, but from the fan base, there's a lot of pressure. And this fan base expects this team to be good this year. I mean, they do. It's not. I mean, I'm not bullshitting there. I mean, around the SEC, they expect this Vanderbilt team to compete. Maybe not the media. I think they were picked 14th last again. So I mean, there's the chip on your shoulder right there. But well, I mean, this team they're capable. They are fully capable. They've got talent. You've got Liam Robbins, a guy. They're experienced too. So I think settle down. It's game 1. They're going to get a win. They're going to ring some wins off here. But I think the next good team they play, as I pull up their schedule, might be in their first tournament out of conference as I pull that up. But I mean, that's the positive spin for me. It's the first game, and you got to play a Memphis team that's nearly impossible to prepare for and simulate. So that's my positive spin there, Will.
Yeah, I think my positive is, and you kind of started getting a little more realistic there at the end of your positive spin, Billy, which I think I will probably too, because there's not a ton of super positive things to take away. But the positive spin is this team shot 40% from 3. And I know some of that was late, but I think this team has the puzzle pieces. I think the key is getting the right pieces in the right places. And I think a lot of college athletics, for the most part, just is that. I think that just getting the right guys in the system, whether it's football or basketball or baseball, I think it's getting the right guys in the right rotations, playing with the right groups of people to perform their best. And I think it's a lot more complementary and a lot less plug and play than professional athletics. And I think people just view college and pros the same, as if you can just plug in Colin Smith with XYZ and it's just going to work out the same way. I don't think it works that way. And what I expected was Stackhouse to make a concerted, God, this is going to get a little negative before it gets positive, to make a concerted effort to play the freshmen together and slowly work them in different test out rotations alongside the experienced guys. But especially when Robbie was reporting back on the scrimmages and reading different articles, I was expecting that Stack had these as the 1s and 2s to get the freshmen used to playing with each other, thinking these guys are going to be together for at least 2, 3, 4 years. And then you already have the other guys that are experienced playing with each other, and then kind of figure out which pieces fit with the opposite puzzle and just kind of put it together. But that wasn't really what happened. You didn't see that happen at all. So maybe This is just data. Stack can scrap the plan that he currently had and move forward, because I think you can undeniably say that outside of losing your best player in Scottie Pippen Jr., and I know that's a big outside of, but the rest of this roster is a lot deeper, and you have a lot more natural talent overall on the roster. So there is some way to combine this talent to be more successful on offense than what we saw in the first 10 minutes of this game. And you rarely see a team shoot 40% from three while shooting 60% from the free throw line and 41% from the field. So chalk some of this up maybe to just first game of the season, a lot of new faces, a lot of new rotations. The coaching staff is getting used to this the same way as everyone else is the players. And that first 10 minutes of this game, if you took it away, Vanderbilt played Memphis pretty even the rest of that game. But you can't take away the first 10 minutes. So look to improve how you start out, change that starting lineup. It's early in the season. There's plenty of time to do that. I don't really point out any individual guys at all that I say played extremely bad. Maybe QMB was a little disappointing. He's old enough to take that direct criticism. I will say QMB. I think he probably overall was the guy outside of Jordan Wright that you would say was individually disappointing. So those two guys improving, but everyone else I would say played at least to my expectations or a little bit better, or at least to those expectations. So moving forward, just different rotations. That's going to be the main outlook. That's my positive view. It's one game. You have to get out of football mode. Games happen. Teams beat teams all the time in college basketball. This is not college football. Every year I have to remind myself of that. It's not the same impact game to game. So
that's the thing.
Let's move on.
We're so used to recapping football games here. And I think that is a difference.
Basketball is more of like a wave. You ride up and down waves. Football is data points that you point up and down, and the graph moves up and down very sharply. Basketball is not that way.
Right. Yeah. And there were some teams that got upset. There were some bad losses last night. Stetson beat Florida State, I think.
See that Belmont buzzer beater?
Yeah,
against
I saw
Ohio,
that.
number one, I think, on SportsCenter. It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and it's things like that. I mean, that was a great crowd at Belmont, and you would have liked to see that at Vanderbilt. Maybe a more exciting game, a more exciting product, and that was not a good product. Will, I mean, that was not a great start to the season. But you've got a kind of a bounce back game here Friday night against Southern Miss at home, and then you got to go to Temple, play Temple. Then you got Morehead State. And then the next competitive game, I think, for Vanderbilt is probably St. Mary's at home. I mean, in all honesty, but they got to play Pitt in the non-conference and NC State as well. So the non-conference, it's not a gauntlet by any means, but it's also not easy. But there are some games out there that Vanderbilt can improve their resume. But I think just playing this game should help their resume in terms of strength of schedule and just throwing the tape in and looking at this and saying, man, there's a lot to fix. There's a lot to figure out, and all that to say, they'll get back to the drawing board and they'll keep swinging. I mean, that's what this team has to do, and I'm sure they'll do it. It's impossible to prepare for that Memphis team. So once again, Vanderbilt loses by 9 to Memphis. Anything else you got on the Memphis?
I just have to add in the one thing of it's kind of what we said about in general how we would view the Vanderbilt football defense after they got into the non-incredible offenses of top 10 teams, and not having Heisman candidates week in, week out, that you would say it's not awesome, but it's definitely not as bad as we thought early. And I think you're going to say the same thing. I mean, this Memphis team is a very, very good defensive team.
Yes.
That is their thing. This over-under was
they were full court pressing. They were full court pressing the whole night.
Yeah. Vanderbilt's over-under in points was 68.5 in Vegas. So they were right on that, even though I know they had started out the game with 6 points, and a lot of that was a late flurry. They were right on the expectations. So this offense, it's going to be amazing. The improvement that we are going to see when Vanderbilt is not playing Memphis. It's going to be golden all over this,
the
all
Golden
over
Eagles.
Twitter, all over Golden Eagles. It's going to be just, wow, look at the improvements that Jerry Stackhouse has made.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that is TBD. That is not going to be based on the offensive output or these guys hitting shots. Vanderbilt's just going to have the better athletes and the better individual players. I'm going to be looking for how Stack gets those wins, because this season, the upcoming games and then this non-conference isn't if, it's how, outside of the games that you named off individually there that were kind of tests out of conference. We're past it. That's the main thing. I think I was talking to my dad last night, and I was saying that it's going to be weird for Vanderbilt fans to hear me really, for the first time, talking about basketball from the perspective of not give him time. And that is all that I've said. And it's
That's
not
no
that
longer an excuse.
I've never thought that Jerry Stackhouse, like, I've never been definitively like Jerry Stackhouse is the guy. I've just said we don't know, and we haven't had a chance. He hasn't had a chance from where Bryce Drew left this program. Well, now he has had a chance.
This is the
and
chance.
I'm not saying that anyone expects this team to compete for being a top 4 seed or 5 seed in the SEC tournament or the NCAA tournament, but the expectation is to be on the bubble / in the NCAA tournament this year and not battling to stay out of the first round of the SEC tournament. This should be a middle of the pack SEC team that's an 8, 9, 10 seed there in the NCAA tournament. And those expectations are going to stay the same. Just like the expectations for football this year were not going to be judged by wins and losses once they hit the 3-win mark. And just like last basketball season was not judged by the final score and the final W number in the win column. But this year is. And so it's going to be a change in kind of view and narrative and perspective of how we analyze these games, that for the first time, Billy, I'm criticizing losses and wins. I'm not just going into it saying how this team played. We're looking for improvement. The improvement time is over. A lot of these guys are gone next year. So you're either building for the future or you're an experienced team that's ready to take the next step while also giving these young guys experience. So Stack, this is it, man. I mean, if it doesn't happen this year, next year is a fired halfway through the season type of season if things don't drastically improve. So it's NCAA tournament or bust, Billy.
This is it. I mean, this is it, Will. And I'll hit on what you just said. It's not really the score of the Memphis game. Yeah, they lost by 9, but it was how they looked. It was what happened. It was the, watching the game with your eyes. It's what you saw.
They got dominated.
They got dominated in every sense of the imagination.
They didn't lose by single digits like it shows.
No, it's like Tennessee and Georgia. I mean, that should have been a 40-point loss for Tennessee, but the rain started coming down for Vanderbilt. I mean, they had that late flurry, and credit to them, they didn't quit, but that game was not a 9-point game. I mean, Memphis dominated that from start to finish. So again, that is the Memphis game. Not spending too much time on it because we got a season preview to get to here, Will. So kind of shifting our attention to that with the Vanderbilt Commodores this year. And I told you before we got on, Will, I'm going to run through the most important players on this team. And we're going to kind of talk about their expectations and what we expect to see from them. So you could say we're getting personal here. I mean, you really could, kind of putting us in Stackhouse's shoes if we have player meetings before the year with each guy and saying, hey, here's what you got to do. Here's what we expect from you this year. So we're going to start with Miles Stute. So Miles Stute, junior forward, experienced player now, best shooter on the team. I think we agree with that. Plays with swagger and an intensity that I don't think any other player has on Vanderbilt.
Can I say one thing before you get into Stute? I would say most consistently good shooter on the team, because I think hot Trey Thomas gives probably Trey Thomas money, but Trey Thomas is much streakier than Miles Stute is.
I would agree with that. I would definitely agree with that. Well, he's not much of a driver. We'll see if that improved over the offseason. I mean, he's just, it's not his game. But if he can add that, that'd be a big piece. When he's making shots, Will, it's like Trey Thomas. When he gets on a rhythm, when he hits 4 or 5 in a row, when Miles Stute's hitting his shots, Vandy's typically winning games. I mean, I think, what did he have, Will, in this game? I don't think it was a crazy output, 12.
He was 12, 4 of 8 from 3.
Yeah, 4 of 8 from 3. So he 50%. Was hitting his shots, but at the same time, he's had games where he hits his shots, and that really lifts Vanderbilt. And I think that more times than not, it's going to be the case where Miles Stute hits 4 threes. You'd expect this team to be at least in the game, and they weren't in this game. So that says a lot about everybody else. He's a very important piece to this year's puzzle. He really is. he can be a menace on defense, I think, as well. I mean, he's an underrated defender, I think, as well, Will. So Miles Stute, my expectations for him is making his shots. I mean, 4 threes a game. I would say he played a pretty damn good game against Memphis. I mean, that's a pretty good showing for him. He doesn't have to do a whole lot else. I mean, yeah, maybe driving, getting inside the lane occasionally, but he's a shooter. I mean, that's what he does. But he's also one of the leaders on this team now. I mean, he's an emotional leader, and he should be. And he's got that intensity, Will, that you need against SEC teams. We saw him last year against Tennessee and Kentucky. He was getting into their head a little bit, so he can do that. And I know you love that about him. I think Vandy fans should love that about him. We rarely get a player like that. I mean, you don't usually see a player like Miles Stute in the black and gold inside Memorial Gym. You just don't. So I think he's a huge piece of this year's team, and I think you'd agree, Will. So that's what I got on Miles Stute. What are your expectations for him?
I mean, he is the shooter on this team, and obviously he has favor with Jerry Stackhouse. He's very athletic. I mean, he needs to be shooting 7 to 10 3-pointers a game. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what he did. He shot 4 of 8. He shot 44 or 43% from 3 last year, improving that from 28% during his freshman year. And he shot 5 threes a game last year. So that number needs to keep going up. And I think his percentage will stay pretty much the same. So that's a dude shooting in his mid 40s, mid 40 percentile from the 3-point line. Now, the driving is something that I don't know if that's something that's going to be added. I mean, how many of his shots, and it's a crazy high number, have been from outside the 3-point line? I mean, pretty much all of them. But really, with Jordan Wright being a guy that's going to be paired with him a lot, you don't need him to drive to the basket. You need him to be the 2A/2B there. And I don't think that Vanderbilt has the number one guy this season on the team, and I don't think anybody expected them to. But you have 2A, 2B. You have a combo of 2 guys that basically create that one dynamic scorer. And Jordan Wright is a good enough shooter to demand respect, but Miles Stute is knocked down. And he also has that dog in him. You don't know how to describe it. It's well known that Miles Stute is my favorite player on the team, just because he's got that fuck you personality. And you have to have that when you're playing at Vanderbilt, and every good team has that, or has that guy that's willing to do that. And he is that. He's willing to take all the emotional energy from the other team and just have it emphasized on him. So less emotional guys like Jordan Wright and Wright Liam Robbins can relax and play. He's just, that is an undervalued portion of a basketball game that the best example of is the dude from Ole Miss, Marshall Henderson.
Yeah.
He was that for that team. That team wasn't that good, but every bit of that team was focused on him. And I think Miles Stute just has a little bit of that, just enough. You don't want full Marshall Henderson. That's a whole different level. He has the right amount to play in a controlled amount, and he's a knockdown shooter. So naturally, I really like Miles Stute as a player, and he's got to step up. And he was really the only guy out of the main dudes, the main returning guys, that performed how I expected. Yeah. And there's something to be said for that he was the guy that hit the only shot at the beginning of the game. He got Vanderbilt started with a 3, and there was only one other 3 for the other 10 minutes of the rest of that first half. But Stute's expectations are to take a step forward, but he's got to have other guys help him, because like you said, he's not a driver, and I don't think that's something necessarily in his game that needs to or will be added.
He's a perfect player to have with you on the road, in road atmospheres. You saw it last year. I mean, he loves it. He eats it up. So, and you need him to play well at home too. That'd be nice as well. Well, up next, Quentin Malora-Brown, 5th-year senior. He's a 5th-year senior now, of course, playing down low, tough, gritty, real glue guy, I'd say. I mean, he's a glue guy for this team. Obviously, he's not much of an offensive threat, but he seemed to get last year, 3 to 4 buckets a game off of offensive rebounds. And that's where he makes an impact on the game. Offensive rebounding, also defensive rebounding, but pure and simple rebounding. They need him to rebound. They need him to just kind of get in the heads of other teams and piss them off and be like, how is this guy beating us on the boards? And look at QMB and say, how's this guy beating us? So also on defense, Will is a good defender. He made a huge defensive impact last year. That's a very smart player. He knows the offense inside and out. I think that's probably why he gets the upper hand over Liam. I think Stack loves his smarts. He loves the grit. He loves the defense. Now, I still think I would love to see Liam Robbins start, and I think you agree with me there. But QMB, I mean, he's kind of the heart and soul of this team, you could argue. I mean, just his personality and I mean, he plays gritty. It didn't play very particularly well against Memphis. I don't think he liked playing against those athletes. But he's a glue guy. He's tough. They need him. I mean, he's another guy. He's up there for important pieces to this team. So obviously not an offensive threat here, Will, but his expectations are lock down your guy, play good defense, but also rebound. He's got to be on the offensive boards. I think he lost some rebounds against Memphis. I mean, there were some opportunities for him to get a ball and, he gets it tapped away from him or, he gets out jumped. So, he's not an athlete. I wouldn't really call him an athlete, but he's just kind of a gritty guy, like a Matthew Dellavedova at the forward spot, where it's just kind of weird how he's having an impact on the game, but he is, and he has had impacts on games. So QMB, Will, his expectations for me are just keep doing what you did last year. I mean, down the stretch of last season, he was a huge piece to that team. And I think he became a little bit of a fan favorite last year. So I know we loved him at certain points last year, but there's pressure on him as well, Will, to guard really good players. So defense and rebounding, that's what I'd say for all QMB there.
There's a reason I'm drinking whiskey, Billy, because I promised myself that I was a little too positive for a little bit of a stretch, and I think I lost a little bit of being honest with my actual view and viewing Vanderbilt as a real SEC program. And I think I lost it a little bit in football and leading up to the basketball season, just with kind of discussions. I know we haven't done the preview and this is it, but I love QMB. I love the energy he plays with. He's not a Power 5 basketball player. So if I was Jerry Stackhouse, my main sit down with QMB was enjoy the bench until Liam gets in foul trouble, because Ansong provides an athletic version of what you do. And Malik Dia provides a shooting version of what you do. He doesn't provide anything on offense on a team that struggles with scoring from the outside. The fact that he's starting over Liam Robbins is the number one problem that I have with Jerry Stackhouse, and was the first thing that I saw in the broadcast that put me in a horrible mood, because Liam Robbins and QMB are not on the same planet of basketball talent. No one would deny that. Liam Robbins is potentially an NBA basketball player if he comes out and performs well at 7'1" with a smooth outside jumper and the fluidity of movement, shot blocking ability. QMB will not sign with a European basketball team. If Jerry Stackhouse can't evaluate that in a starting lineup, we have a long time
Houston,
to go
we've got
in this season. We have a big problem. So my message to QMB is he's going to get minutes, because what I just said, you like what you said, he's a good, solid defender. He would be really good at Belmont as a role player at Belmont. He'd be really good. But he's a big body, he's strong, he plays hard. So when Liam's in foul trouble and you need somebody to be a poor man's Liam Robbins, QMB's your guy. But the rotational situations, you have Malik Dia and Lee Dort that frankly are just better and younger. And really provide more upside. So that would be my message, is I think his minutes should probably be in the single digits. Until that happens, Vandy's going to continue to struggle on offense.
Yeah, I was surprised to see him starting over Robbins. I mean, I think that's kind of a universal thing, I hope, with Vanderbilt fans. Well, let's move on here. Tyron Lawrence, junior guard. He looked improved from last season in the Memphis game. He looked like he, got a little bit more athletic. I mean, he's the most athletic guard on the team, I think. You could say they'll need his shooting this year. I mean, I think he made a couple threes. They'll need him to do that. Now, that's not what if I'm meeting with him before the season, it's not, Tyron, we need your shooting. That's it. That's not it. That's really the opposite. We need his athleticism. We need his defense. We need his length. He saw the dunk there. I mean, we need that. We need just your athleticism on display. That's where they'll need him. Getting to the basket is his game. I mean, he's tough to defend when he's going to his left and has a step on his defender. And so, he's a big piece to this year's puzzle. I mean, he's older now. I think we're used to talking about Tyron as the young Tyron Lawrence. He'll be good down the road. Well, we're down the road now. I mean, and there's pressure on everybody now. There's an added pressure, and it's on Tyron Lawrence as well. And we're going off of one game this season. Well, he had 14 points. I mean, it's not like he lit the world on fire, but there were some moments there from Tyron where, he's turning into somewhat of a scorer. And you saw him get inside the lane, kind of fake, little up and under moves from him inside the paint, and he looks stronger. And I think he's gotten better from last year. I think he's, at least from the Memphis game, from what I saw. So, Will, again, he's not going to be relied upon to shoot, but he's going to be guarding really good guards on the other side. So he's got to be a great defender, and they've got to use his length. But he's got to be an offensive threat for them. He has to. There's not enough other guys around him to where he can't, sit back. He's got to be a scorer for this team. So, and I'm not going to say the same thing about Ezra Manjon, because that's not what he can do. I mean, he's literally not a scorer, but Tyron Lawrence can be a scorer. And I think he showed that against Memphis. So, well, he's another guy that's important to this team this year. Of course, staying healthy is huge, but at the same time, he's made that jump, I think, at least, judging from one game. And, he's that guard that looks, he's an SEC guard. I mean, he's an SEC athlete. He's a Division I college basketball player, unlike not Liam Robbins, unlike QMB. So he is a legit player. He's one of those guys where you look at their team and say, that's a good piece of their team. Wish I had him on ours. He really is. So I like what I saw from Tyron Lawrence, Will, against Memphis. And if he plays like that, man, this team is can be on another level. So obviously, Will, he's not relied upon as a top maybe 2 or 3 scorer, but he's got to hold up his end of the bargain.
Tyron Lawrence is in an interesting spot because he is a Power 5 basketball player. He's a 6'4" guard, long wingspan, very, very athletic. He had 4 turnovers. I think he led the team last night in turnovers. So everybody is rating him an A+ because he led the team in scoring, but he didn't play that well. And he missed some gimmies. He shot 2 of 3 from 3. But Lawrence is going to have a big role this year. The only problem is him and Jordan Wright have the exact same game. Tyron Lawrence is just a less proven shooter, but more athletic and a better defender. So that's from the start is my lineup issues. Are you played 3 guys at your 1 through 3 positions that are not threats to shoot the ball? And he shot 35% from 3 last year. And I'm not saying that's bad. I think that was 5th or 6th on the team. He's certainly dangerous if left open from outside, but he's not a quick trigger, quick release guy. And teams are much more concerned about him driving to the basket. So early in the year, this would be my message to Jordan Wright. You have to prove to teams to Tyron Lawrence. Good grief. Yeah,
Jordan Wright's next.
Yeah, Jordan Wright's next. Good grief. Tyron Lawrence has to prove early, which he did, and that's who I was even talking about. And I, for some reason, said Jordan Wright, so I wasn't that far off. But he has to prove to teams early in the season that he can be a 35% shooter or a low 30% shooter and not a 20% shooter from the 3-point line. And the reason I mixed all that up was because I was going to say that he needs to take the role of the 33 to 35. Wright needs to go from the 35 to being that 40 range 3-point shooter. Otherwise, this is the big issue. It's the same thing we talked about at wide receiver in football. And I like drawing these connections, even though they're very, very different sports. But it doesn't matter if Quincy Skinner Jr. occasionally makes a catch on an incredible throw from A.J. Swan. It's about how the defense is designed and how they're forced to guard the other players based on how they have scouted you in past performances. And do teams fear Jordan Wright popping a quick 3 on a short closeout? No, they don't. And they certainly don't fear that from Tyron Lawrence, which is awesome that he shot 2 for 3. But he's going to have to do that and shoot at that level against actual closeouts and not wide open 3s that are perfectly in rhythm. And he's going to have to do it consistently because the defense is going to close out, play him more aggressive on the outside, which is a good thing. I'm not saying this is a negative, but Tyron's got to take a massive step forward if this is how Stack plans to use him on the offensive end of the court. because he doesn't have a scorer at the point guard position anymore. So if you don't have a scorer at your point guard position, your two guard has to be a scorer.
Yep.
Because you already have one piece of dead weight on the court on offense in Mannion. And if you start QMB, there's number two.
Yeah, I'm with you, Will.
Really. And everything else is going to get to other players. So I keep trying not to jump forward on the roster.
I like it. I respect it. You just mentioned Jordan Wright. That leads us right into Jordan Wright. He has to be the guy this year. He has to be the guy. There's no other option. There's no hiding from it, Jordan. You're a senior. You're a leader. You're an emotional leader. That's why Stack took you to SEC Media Days with him. It'll be interesting, Will, as we go through this season to see the jump that he makes from his junior to senior year. His late success last season was big. I mean, he sort of came on as a guy that we thought, I don't think we were determined that he's going to be able to pick up the slack fully from Pippen. I don't think anybody's going to be able to do that. But I think from what we saw down the stretch of last season from Jordan Wright, he can be a scorer. I mean, he is a scorer. I mean, that's his game. He puts the ball in the basket. He's an emotional leader of this team. He's another coach on the floor. I mean, that's what Rodney Chapman was last year. And I think that really helped Vanderbilt, and they're going to miss him this year. As much as they're going to miss Pippen, boy, are they going to miss Chapman and his leadership and his defense. Jordan Wright has to be the guy. I mean, he has to be a little bit of Pippen and a little bit of Chapman this year. I mean, you got to be able to score similar to Pippen, not 100% of what Pippen did, but you've also got to be able to lead the team and kind of, carry the responsibility like Chapman did a lot of times last year. I mean, Chapman, damn, I miss him. But Will, that's what Chapman was last year. So Wright has to shoulder a little bit of that. A lot of pressure on him this season, in my opinion. And I think you'd agree. This team's success might oftentimes depend on his success. And it did against Memphis. I mean, he really, really struggled. He didn't play most of that second half, which was interesting, especially against SEC opponents. Will, I mean, you gotta have Jordan Wright at his best. He looked out of sync against Memphis. They really looked like they honed in on him, and he's going to get a lot of that in the SEC. Where who's the guy we're scared of? Who's the one guy we got to stop? It's that guy, Jordan Wright, and he's going to get a lot of it. That's what Pippen got a lot of last year. He still put up big numbers most games. Jordan's going to have to do that. So tough job for Jordan, but he's got to be the leader. He's got to be the scoring leader, the scoring output leader most games. And I don't know that there's as much pressure on him defensively as there are other guys, certain guys, because he is such an offensive threat, and they don't want to, tire him out, similar to Scottie Pippen. Stackhouse didn't put Scottie Pippen in very many, disadvantageous, if that's even a word, defensive situations last year. Like, they didn't force Scottie to lock up the other team's best player. I mean, that was usually Chapman. So I think that's a little bit of Wright. Stack's going to do his best to make it somewhat easier on Wright, but nothing's easy about this year for Jordan Wright. And there's pressure on him, just like a lot of other players, just like Stack and this coaching staff. So, Will, I'll just say this: he's got to be the guy. And I mean, it's now or never for Jordan Wright. I mean, and for this team, he shoulders so much of that. He really does. So, Will, I expect him to be better. He's not going to, he'll probably play really well against Southern Miss, and that, might change my mind. But, at the end of the day, Memphis is similar to an SEC team. You can't play like that. They need you, and the team needs you. They need you to be better. So, Jordan Wright, he knows that. He's a smart guy. He's a leader. And I expect him to be better, but at the same time, if he's not better, this team's going to struggle. So, well, that's what I'll say about Wright. And, the jump from junior to senior year is what I'm looking at this year.
Yeah, I don't think Jordan Wright is in any way even close to a replacement for Scottie Pippen Jr., but he's definitely the guy that has to score in double digits every single night or you're going to lose. And that's Jordan Wright this year. And this is a really tough guy to evaluate. So in basketball, I don't even think there's 5 positions anymore. There's a point guard, ball handler. There's 2-3. That's your 3 positions. And then there's a post. And Jordan Wright is the perfect example of that flex, whatever the hell it is, position. 6'6". He's a scorer, and he's got to improve his shooting. He improved it, and he's continued to improve it throughout his career. He shot 35.8% from three last year. If he maintains that percentage, that's an improvement because his shots are going to be a lot tougher this year. And that's the main point of my entire Jordan Wright portion of this is, so every single lineup and every single team really has a scorer, has a guy that is that go get you a bucket. Everyone has it. And if you don't have at least a guy that's semi that on the court, just forget about it. That's Jordan Wright. It doesn't mean he has to do it every time, but he's your best offensive scorer. When you say the term scorer, he's not a shooter, he's a scorer. The issue is the lineups around him. Last year, Jordan Wright was a shooter, I would say, shooter, driver, scorer, but it was off of Scottie Pippen Jr. sucking in the defense, late help, trying to close out, opening up lanes for Jordan Wright driving and opening up wide open outside jumpers. This year, he has to be the guy not only scoring those looks, but also creating those for others. And Mignon has to take a little bit, which I'm sure we'll get to him, has to create a little bit of that action, being a traditional point guard without the outside shooting capabilities of Scottie Pippen Jr. So a little bit of that is off the shoulders of Jordan Wright, who I don't think we fully expect to take over the role of Scottie Pippen Jr. of being literally the entire offense. But the problem is you have to put shooters around Jordan Wright. Mm-hmm. So when you have Mignon on the court helping him create some of those opportunities, sometimes Mignon is the creator, but that's going to be 20, 30% of the time. The issue is when Wright is driving, the only other shooter for the most part on the court at the same time as him was Miles Studi. So the defense is able to just completely pack in the lane. He's not able to do what he was so successful with last year. And this is my main message to Jerry Stackhouse, which was infuriating. And I think I ranted about it for about an hour last night to my dad, is they continued to try to seal Jordan Wright against a smaller defender last night early in the game against Memphis. But Memphis completely denied it, and they were just never able to get the ball into him. And I kept having the problem of in my head of last year, you either had Scottie Pippen Jr. on the backside, not allowing the backside help to help over it all, or you had Scottie Pippen Jr. making the entry pass and demanding the attention of a secondary defender, leaving Jordan Wright on an island. This year, you don't have that. So you can't seal him against a smaller defender because they're just going to bring help over to then kick out to a non-shooter. And that was how the entire offense was designed this year. So Jordan Wright is the number one scoring option on this team. He has to play better than he did against Memphis last night. And I think we both expect him to as they continue to gel and figure out this offense. But a lot of this is he was not put in situations to succeed in this offense. And that was going to contribute a lot to him having 7 points. He didn't get opportunities to score. He didn't get opportunities to utilize his skill set of being isolated against undersized defenders because Jerry Stackhouse designed the offense poorly. So moving forward, he has to be in one-on-one situations where you have backside shooters that demand respect of the help and don't allow them to get foot in the paint help, because otherwise it's going to be impossible for Jordan Wright to score consistently like he did last year, because you're just not having the same offensive threats from the outside, keeping that long athletic help from Memphis out of the paint. But then again, it was Memphis. They're one of the longest, most athletic teams in the country, and probably one of the toughest matchups that Jordan Wright will see until we get deep into SEC play here. So Jordan Wright, there are big expectations, but this has to be one of, if not the last single-digit performance that we see out of you this year.
As you mentioned, Will, Ezra Mignon was the guy passing it into Jordan Wright. Last year, that was Pippen. So Pippen demanded that attention. Ezra Mignon does not demand that attention. He simply does not. And we're going to talk about Mignon now. He is a veteran point guard. He's undersized.
And Chapman, also turned into a hell of a shooter last season.
Yes,
I think that's kind of, I keep forgetting about it, is he was also an incredible threat that opened up this entire offense and kind of allowed them to make that hopeful run at the end of the season. So somebody's got to replace that.
Yeah, I mean, you lose Pippen and Chapman. Whew, that ain't easy. So, Will, Ezra Mignon, he's obviously undersized, and that is going to be a liability this year. It just is. It was against Memphis. Now, I don't think he has to be 6'2" or 6'3". Like they can survive. They can live with Magnon being 6 foot. He's probably not even 6 foot. He's probably closer to 5'10". But he is shifty. He's athletic. He's a great defender. He played Kendrick Davis pretty well last night. I mean, Kendrick Davis is a guy, he's gonna put up 30, 40 points a couple times this year. He wasn't gonna do that against Magnon. Magnon is he's a hell of a defender, man. And that makes up, well, we'll see. But I think Stack's plan is for that to make up for the lack of offense. We'll see if that actually, comes true. But I do think that that's the hope for him. Obviously he's not an offensive threat really at all. We'll see how much scoring he provides. I don't think it's going to be very much at all. But he doesn't need to average 15 a game. I don't even know how many times he's going to get close to 15 this year, but 8 to 10 a game would be nice from him. Like we can't have, 3, 4, 5 points a game from Magnon. Getting him somewhere in that 8, 9, 10, range, I think would be best case scenario. But even then it's like, you're still not getting that out of your point guard. The thing about this is, most point guards in the SEC are scorers. I would say almost all. And that's what you had in Pippen last year. I know they rotated a lot. Sometimes you saw Chapman at point guard. End of the day, Pippen was the point guard last year, and he was a scorer. He was a bona fide proven scorer. You don't have that this year. Magnon has been inserted, and he is purely a defender. That's how I would describe his game. He is a lockdown defender. And he is going to give the opposing point guard fits. He's one of those guys that as a point guard, I'm sure Davis hated that last night. He couldn't stand. And Magnon, I don't know how many turnovers he created, but he made the other guy uncomfortable. And I think that's a great weapon. I really do, Will. But in today's day and age, you need your point guard to be a scorer. So I hate talking about Magnon in a negative light, because he is their only option really there at point guard. Noah Shelby is there, and maybe Shelby does end up starting down the road. It doesn't look like it now, but seeing Shelby more would be nice. But Magnon right now, Will, he's the guy at point guard. And so I would say his expectations, if you're stacked before the year, take care of the ball, be smart. We're not relying on you to score. As weird as that sounds, to tell your point guard that. Sometimes that's the case. Sometimes it has to be the case. For Magnon, it is. But he's got to create havoc defensively, and he can. He didn't get tired last night. He was still hounding Kendrick Davis. So if I'm Stackhouse, I'm telling Magnon, play your ass off defensively the whole game. But at the same time, we need you to be a leader. We need you to, control the offense. We need you to be that manager that Pippen was, minus the scoring. So, Will, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how this plays out with Magnon. You can't really rotate anybody else other than maybe Shelby right now. But Magnon's the guy. Magnon's the guy right now. And so, I hate saying he's going to be a liability, but he is. He's not going to be able to match up offensively. Like defensively, he's going to be able to match up. Now he's not very big. So, but it's at the same time, you look at him offensively, it's going to hurt him. It's going to hurt the team, not having him be able to score. But he is a great defender. So it just depends on, does that balance out? It's tough to say it will, but I liked him though, Will. I liked what I saw against Memphis, but at the same time, no Pippen, no bueno. But we'll see what Magnon can do. Maybe he can be more of a scorer than he showed against Memphis. Who knows? But that's what I'd say. You got to lock down all game and see what kind of impact that has on the game.
I want to see me proven wrong, but he shot 20% the last 2 years from 3. He's not a scorer. You show me a guard that is a good defender in high school or college, and you show me a useless basketball player, because there are a lot of cornerbacks that can do it a lot better than that, that are playing football right now. And if your point guard can't score, your 2 and 3 better be knocked down. And certainly Tyron Lawrence is not that. You have Trey Thomas sitting there at his size. He has to be a point guard. So he is the solution to this problem. But Magnon being on the court is just a recipe for stagnant offense. He's just a player that can't shoot from the outside. He's starting and initiating every bit of your offense, and every defender is going to be 100% comfortable going underneath every single screen and bumping every single roll. And so you're seeing Jerry Stackhouse, and I love that I'm getting to get to my issues with the rotation within this kind of quote unquote preview. But you're running the same high screen action and same motion with a guard that can't shoot. So the defender is having no problem hard hedging, bumping that post roll, and then sucking back versus what Pippen forced them to do, which was either double, force over the screen on the double, or switch completely. There's no fear of that with Mignon. So they're just hard hedging and getting straight back with help on the backside because shooters are not spread out, preventing the help from being there. And that was why the offense looked so bad. I mean, I was seeing on Twitter, what's going on? What's all this? What's all the problem? That was it. The point guard and the two guard who were initiating the offense almost every single time, the defense didn't feel any need to pressure them outside the 3-point line because they felt no threat from them outside the 3-point line. And if this continues to happen, Mignon just can't see the court. If Stackhouse is determined to play Lawrence as many minutes as he played, those two just cannot be on the court at the same time ever. You can't have your one guard unable to consistently shoot from the outside and combined with a two guard unable to consistently shoot from the outside, combined with a three guard who is a middle of the pack shooter at best, combined with a post player who is no threat outside of 5 feet, when the only guy the defense is having to demand respect from or have demand respected from is your four. Man, that puts you in a tough spot. And I know that all this offense looked fucking fantastic, Jerry, in practice against a defense with which it is designed to beat. And that's my problem with everything I saw, was this offense was clearly a pretty similar format and pretty similar to what they've run in past years. And I didn't expect a big change, but there just wasn't a consistent approach to utilizing guys in spots. Every player on this roster is not an NBA player. Every player cannot do, at least at a minimum level that you have an expectation of, the same things. Ansong can't do things that Miles Duty can do. They will leave him alone every time on the outside. If you have one guy on the court that the defense literally won't guard outside of 15 feet or outside of 12 feet, and then you add another player they won't guard outside of 12 feet, and then you add a point guard they won't guard outside of 15 feet. I mean, how did Jerry Stackhouse not expect Jordan Wright to score 7 points? They just packed the paint and late closed out. It was a high school level game plan from Memphis, and Stackhouse just played right into it by playing guys that can't shoot. So Mignon has to be separated from QMB and Tyron Lawrence, because you can't have three guys on the court at the same time that pose no threat from the outside. Ezra Mignon is going to be utilized. He did a good job of handling the ball. He is a good defender, but good defenders don't win games. Good defenders are role players. And right now, how Ezra Mignon was utilized and how multiple guys were utilized on this roster were not as role players. They were utilized minutes-wise, and how they were emphasized in the offense as scorers, and they're simply not. So that was a lot of the evaluation of really the preview in general. Is so much what I saw against Memphis is it would be so different, because I can't describe to you how differently I would utilize the talent that Vanderbilt has currently on the roster just from what I've seen. And people can say that's because I haven't seen enough, but what I saw on the court in game one tells me whatever Stackhouse watched and evaluated was wrong, and something drastic needs to change between game 1 and 2. And I don't mean that I'm throwing away the rest of the season. And that's not what I want to get to here in this preview. But there are just a lot of things that have to look very, very different. And the expectations aren't going to change because it was disappointing in game 1. The expectations are going to remain the same. And if that makes me negative, it makes me negative. But Ezra Mignon, there has to be something different, because 20% can't be what your point guard shooting from three when you struggle at other positions to shoot.
Yeah, and I think that's going to define this season and the end of, well, I say Stackhouse is going to leave, but not having a scorer to to counteract the departure of Scottie Pippen Jr. might define his tenure. It might. I mean, not being able, you bring in a guy from UC Davis who, yeah, he's a solid, point guard at that level, but he's coming into the SEC. And
I mean, I think you're hitting on the main issue,
more.
Billy, is Stack brought in Ansong and Mignon, who, great, they're role players possibly, but you've brought in these guys that were recruited to non-competitive, not even really good, like not even good non-Power 5 programs and non-major conference programs in college basketball. There's a reason they weren't recruited to SEC programs. They're just not a rounded out enough player. And unless there's unique circumstances, I think this transfer market is, for the most part in basketball, the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. I mean, I haven't seen a lot. How many transfers have you seen in their unique circumstances? I don't want to say that there are none, because there are playing time issues and injuries, and there's always going to be guys missed. But for the most part, guys are recruited where they should be. And especially in basketball, you don't change a ton from 18 or 19 years old to 22 years old. You just don't. I mean, I think a lot of these top-rated recruits could step out on an NBA floor right now. So I think you've recruited in a lot of guys from mediocre programs, and you're getting mediocre results.
That's the biggest thing, and we're getting deep into the Stackhouse era at Vanderbilt here. But one more note I want to hit at, Will, one more note I want to hit at is the amount of guys that have come in and out of this program throughout the past 4 years. Typically not good. And I think we need to have a deeper discussion. If this season gets bad enough, Will, I'm not saying it's going to, but if the time comes, we're going to sit down and have a serious podcast about the Stackhouse era. I don't know that we've done that. We've had serious conversations about him and the era at hand, but I want to do that. So we'll save that down the road. Will, one more guy here, Liam Robbins, as we close out this season preview, if you want to call it that. Fifth-year senior forward, Will, huge piece of this year's team. You could argue he's the best player in this team. I think he is. I think he's the most proven player. He's the lone, legitimate NBA prospect on this team. I think you can argue down the road, maybe Lee Dort, maybe Colin Smith, maybe Noah Shelby, maybe all those guys. But right now, Liam Robbins is the only guy that I look at and say he can play in the NBA right now. I'm confident.
He will play in the NBA. I'm confident.
Yeah. I mean, he's a better offensive player, obviously, than QMB. QMB, might be the better defender, but Liam still has an extreme impact defensively. It wasn't super active versus Memphis, but he didn't play a whole lot versus Memphis, which was pretty mind-boggling. So, well, Liam Robbins, he's, we talk about X factors. I think his production this year will depend on how much he plays. I don't know if Stackhouse has something against Liam Robbins or what it is, but he's got to be on the floor to have an impact. So that's what I'll point to. I think if I'm Stackhouse, seems like he said, you're going to take a back seat to QMB this year. At least that's what it looked like against Memphis. Now, knowing Stack, he'll probably have a totally different rotation starting 5 in on Friday night. That's the way it's been. That's the way it's been. That's the way it needs to be, actually, right now. So, Will, Liam Robbins, like I said, his expectations are, be a scorer in the paint. You've got to be able to get the ball down there into him and score. He had opportunities against Memphis. Now, they could have gotten the ball to him more, but he had a lot of them that just rimmed out, barely. I know he had a couple of post hooks, missed a couple of bunnies, got to convert, got to finish. I just think convert, and finish if you're Liam, but also we need you to defend and rebound, just like QMB. But it's been a mystery to me, why he hasn't played more at Vanderbilt. It really has. So I think you'd agree. Will, Liam Robbins, what you got on him?
This was my main player that I was confused by. So I was confused by the utilization of the freshman, but I got angry about that as Colin Smith ended up playing a little bit, but Lee Dort was kind of like, what the hell? Why is he played 3 minutes, had a highlight block, and then was quickly exited from the game during the only time Vanderbilt made a run against Memphis the entire game. But take him out. Noah Shelby, maybe he's getting back in shape from the injury he sustained during his senior year, the ankle injury. So I'll let that slide. Colin Smith did play a little bit, get his feet under him. He ended up, he airballed his first shot, but he definitely improved as he got used to the speed of the college game. Liam Robbins is unequivocally, undeniably, not even close, the best player on this team. And this is my big issue with how a lot of fans view the game. Is it's very simple to tell who the best player on your team is. It's who's being viewed as a professional prospect. And for the first time, why I was excited about Barton Simmons and Clark Lee is they finally reviewed or looked at recruiting like that, like how a logical human being would look at it, that the best teams produce the most NBA talent / NFL talent. Therefore, producing and looking for aspects that produce the most of this will produce the best program. And Liam Robbins is the only guy on this roster that projects out to being an NBA player. He's got the size. He can step out and actually has a good-looking jumper. He's going to at least make the post step out. And this was a huge concern. Is Jerry Stackhouse capable of designing an offense that basically utilizes Scottie Pippen Jr. with Liam Robbins? Because he needs to be receiving the ball at the high post or outside the three-point line prior to sealing and getting inside the paint, because he's going to draw out their main post defender because he can't leave him alone outside the three-point line. And that takes away their best paint defender and probably their best shot blocker. And if they choose to not do that and not guard him with their best post defender and best shot blocker, then immediately swing over, send over everybody to the other side of the court, and single side seal him with the option to kick over to the backside. And it's really easy. And guess what, Billy? It didn't fucking start. So this was from another portion of being from the beginning that you didn't start your best player. And Liam Robbins is a great sport. He came in, he played really hard when he came in, and he played pretty well even in his limited minutes. Some of that was because of foul trouble. But man, if I was Liam Robbins, I think I'd be sitting down and saying, Coach, I'm just going to train for being inevitably signed by an NBA team and working my way onto a roster very similarly to Luke Cornett than wasting my time backing up a guy that's not going to be able to sign with a European basketball team. And I think Lee Dort and Noah Shelby may be having similar thoughts sitting over there on the end of the bench, and Noah Shelby having Paul Lewis play over top of him and Malik Dia being played more minutes than Lee Dort. I'm just really concerned with how Stack is able to look at talent, analyze it, because you can watch their highlight tapes from high school, and I can tell you I don't give a fuck what they've seen in practice. Those guys are just better. And you're just not seeing the right rotations with the right minutes. And number one starts with Liam Robbins, needs to be the main focus of this offense. Jordan Wright, Miles Studi, perfect tertiary players to him, but this offense needs to run through Liam Robbins at 7'1" with potential to shoot over 30% from three at 7'1".
100% agree. Couldn't agree more. And I think we've agreed all along about Liam Robbins and the role that he has to have on this team. So, well, let's put a wrap on it. I got a couple more things to hit on here. I don't want to hear any more young team excuses from anyone, from Stackhouse, from fans. I'm sick of it. I mean, I don't think I'm hearing it a ton from fans, but the fact that Stackhouse sat there after the game,
what fans are you're hearing.
Well, I mean, you never know with Vandy fans, but with Stackhouse mostly, I mean, you're not a young team. Don't give me that excuse after the game. You're not. You've got 3 seniors and 2 juniors in that starting 5. You're in year 4 of your era, of your tenure. Don't give me that. Will, like I said, it's interesting to me that QMB starts over Liam Robbins. I've said that. The team did look more athletic. They looked like the most athletic they've been under Stackhouse. But you've got to be able to use that. They're at their best, like I said, Will, when they're creating turnovers and getting out in transition. Even going back to last year, it seemed like they found success trapping in corners and dead zones on the floor. It might not always lead to buckets, but they can lead to momentum. And when you're playing inside Memorial Gym, a turnover, even if you don't score, that gets the fans excited. I mean, they want to see something If you're not scoring, they want to see a turnover created. This team feels athletic enough to do that. I mean, I don't know that they have the depth to trap consistently. They obviously can't do what Memphis does and what they did against Vanderbilt, but they did trap a little bit against Memphis, and they had success when they did that. So I think obviously, it's first game, but there's a lot that you can take from that Memphis game negatively, but there's a little bit positively. I think you saw some success with those traps and creating havoc defensively. I think they need to do that more. Well, I think last part here I'll get to. The 4 most important players on the team, I think you'd agree, Jordan Wright, Liam Robbins, Miles Studi, and Tyron Lawrence. I think we can all agree that those 4 guys, I mean, the 4 Musketeers, you feel like those 4 guys, that's good enough to get you into the tournament. Now, whether it's a 10, 11 seed, I don't care, but I mean, that should be. It should be. I left out QB just because he's not an offensive threat. In basketball, well, as you know, it's about putting the ball in the basket. Common theme. All 4 of those guys have played a lot of basketball, and they can put the ball in the basket. So those 4 guys, this team's success is going to depend on what they do, how they can work together. Can they build a cohesive team that has chemistry? And I mean, it's a big question. And I know, I mean, yes, could say we are overreacting, but I don't think we are. I really don't. On a lot of things we've said, and it's year 4. I keep going back to that, Will. It's year 4. And the fact that we're already having this severe of a conversation after the first game of the year is not a good sign. Now, they could have gotten a win over Cleveland State by 30, and, we're all sunshine and roses, but I think it's a good sign that we're getting right at this. It's still football season. I mean, it's just compounding it right now. But, well, those 4 guys, man, I keep pointing back to them. And this team is not young. They're not young. Don't get me.
That's Billy. You hit on it. I think what infuriated me more, and it's a good thing we didn't record right after the game last night.
That would have been
5 of the 8 guys that played 14 plus minutes last night were seniors, and you played 2 grad transfers, including one that was actually out for the last portion of the game. And prayers up to Ansong. He had took a kind of.
By the way, we haven't talked enough about him. He played his ass off. I know we did touch on it a little bit, but Will, I'm not saying he's going to light the world on fire this year, but man, he played his ass off. I mean,
he's another senior transfer, and it's like Magnon, and then you played Jordan Wright, then you played QMB, and you can't blame inexperience or youth or saying you're talented when 5 of your 8 main players that played the most minutes in this game aren't going to be here next year. And that's the most frustrating part is, are you that dumb? Do you not realize that excuse isn't going to work? And any mention of inexperience is going to infuriate everyone 10 times over, just evaluating this game for what it was, a shitty performance. If he would have come out and started Colin Smith and started Lee Dort and started Noah Shelby alongside Jordan Wright and Miles Studi and said, we're building for the future with some experienced guys, and if everything goes really well with these young guys, we think by the end of the year, this could be a tournament team. I think the criticism would be much less, but you played 5 guys that are seniors in the top 8 of your rotation that won't be here next year. So don't give the excuse of inexperience. What are you building for? What are you building with? You're building with nothing. So that's the main problem, is the post-game comments did not give me the impression that Jerry Stackhouse is a very self-aware man, which I think we already knew that. But if he can't look and just look in the post-game and say, my game plan sucked, the players didn't execute my shitty game plan, they executed it very poorly, there's blame everywhere. Shots didn't fall. There's blame everywhere, but something has to be said for a portion of that blame falls squarely on the shoulders of the game plan created by Jerry Stackhouse and that staff the entire offseason, having the entire offseason, I repeat it, to evaluate the talent on this roster and coming out with these rotations to utilize game 1 versus the Memphis Tigers. That makes me question the overall intelligence and average IQ being above 70 in that echo chamber that Stackhouse might have created.
Man, well, I knew this would be fun. I think Vanderbilt fans will be interested to listen to this. Obviously, I think we'll have more to listen to probably our South Carolina recap. But man, we're getting right at it. Here, basketball season's here, and Southern Miss Friday night for Vanderbilt, so they'll have a chance to. they'll have a chance.
I need
to
a win. I need a win so bad. Take all this and make me look stupid, Jerry. Don't lose another game.
Women's basketball got to win, so there we go. They beat Western Kentucky.
If they become good again, dude, I'm all in. Like, you have no idea. Like, and that is the perfect opportunity for me.
Shea Ralph,
dude. It is my opportunity to be the face as well, because I know tickets are not expensive to those games, and I can be front row. And the same stuff that I yell at football games and men's basketball games, I know the referees and opposing players will hear it during the women's basketball games.
You're going to be a menace.
Just Vanderbilt and the entire women's basketball roster, who I saw there sitting outside signing autographs at one of the Vanderbilt football games. Yeah. If you guys get ranked every single game that the Vanderbilt women's basketball team is ranked, I will attend at home. And I make that as a promise. So you give me a ranked Vanderbilt women's basketball program, I will be there every single home game. I live like 5 minutes from the stadium. This is a promise, Vanderbilt women's basketball. You will not find a bigger supporter if you're able to climb into that top 25.
All in. I might just join you, Will. I might just join you.
It'd be fun. Gym for that.
Drink
a couple beers, watch some basketball.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Watch some winning basketball. Oh, first game of the year, a loss to Memphis, but they should get back on track. Will, if this continues against Southern Miss, we might have to have that emergency press conference a little bit earlier. We might have to have an emergency episode on Saturday morning or something to basically talk about that.
If we lose to Southern Miss, I'll also go to church on Sunday. So clearly I've done something wrong if we lose to Southern Miss.
Oh, man, that'll do it. We got to get out of here. Door Report, episode 189, powered by Alaco Fine Wood Floors.